introduction. GEW North Texas Global Entrepreneurship Week. I'm Jessica Bowman, co-founder and iOpen Innovations. So iOpen Innovation is a unified cloud-based platform with a GPS-driven panic button system, real-time data for room, environmental, and cloud storage analytics. Thank you for everybody. This is the first time hybrid, so it's kind of challenging for me as well. So welcome to everybody to join us today. So I would like to thank you, Hannah Walker, to sponsor the venue for us as well. So we have 4 panels today, so I will kind of introduce one by one. So the first, Hannah Walker. She's a Chief Operating Officer of Sinclair Digital Services, Inc., a low voltage design and consulting company developing digital DC microgrid buildings. Hannah graduated from Texas A&M with an architectural degree in 2017, added CCNA and RCDD certifications in January 2020. The Sinclair Hotel was completed, making the most diverse PoE-powered DC microgrid building in the world. Let's welcome Hannah Walker. Yeah, you want to say something? Okay, you're a great model to inspire the young people. Thank you, join us today. The second, Vanessa Ogle, you are my model. You're all over the news. Thank you. And she is a founder of NCO, the unrivaled industry innovation leader and in digital entertainment room. Controlled energy management for more than 22 years. Vanessa is an experienced Latina CEO and entrepreneur in connected technology, entertainment, digital safety, and network solutions. A passionate mother, wife, innovator, writer, and a musician. She has revolutionized industry with her endeavors. She currently holds 120 US patents. It's unbelievable. Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is truly inspiring. Truly, so thank you so much to join us. The third one is virtual. Keith Handley, Senior Vice President of Operation at Highgate, the leading hospitality investment and management company. Keith is hotel industry executive, has spent time with Hyatt International, Marriott Hotel Equities. He has developed skills including strategy, vision, and mission planning. He has earned awards from both his time in operation and sales. Team building and performance are his expertise. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you, Jessica. Good to be here.
I also see your personal goal is to be the best husband and the father for your son you can be. That's really inspiring for us. Welcome.
Thank you.
Number 4, Brendan Lee, Principal at Reed Hospitality Asset Management. Brendan has experienced 30 years in the hospitality industry. Graduated from UNLV, the top hotel school in the world. Attended the food beverage summer program at Inclo Hotelier de la Chambre, I hope pronounced the right way, and earned several certifications for Cornell University. Welcome, Brendan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. As an advisor to iOpen a couple years now, your insight really truly give us a lot of great information. Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you.
So the first question is, what do you take on the industry in this post-COVID world, and what do you see has changed? That's Vanessa, you go ahead first.
Obviously, we've had a significant set of revolutions here in the hospitality industry in the post-COVID world, and I think one of the biggest changes was an appreciation of hospitality by people who didn't have a chance to travel, and the fact that when they chose to travel, they could choose hotels wisely. And part of the things that are being chosen when people choose hotels is not just the location of the hotel, but the mindfulness with which a hotel is put together, the technology package and how that makes them feel when they walk in their hotel room, the green footprint of that hotel, and if they are choosing to be a good consumer of energy in the world. And especially our young travelers are making some really interesting choices as they see hotels. From the owner's perspective, one of the things that became a reality for the first time during COVID was a lack of occupancy.
Yeah.
Driving up to COVID, occupancy levels over 80% were typical, over 85%, over 95% in some major markets were standard. And so when we tried to have conversations with hotels and hoteliers about the importance of energy saving technologies, connected devices, and the benefit that that would give to the hotel, to the brand, to the owner, there wasn't a lot of uptake on that because the hotels were fully booked. There wasn't a lot of driving legislation to make them do that. And so that's one of the things that's caught up in this last couple of years. Legislation has caught up. We've got pending legislation showing that that's very important to have connected technologies that are manageable. Some states, some cities are going to be actually asking for part of the accounting for hospitality to be energy savings. So it's not just having a thermostat, it's having a thermostat that's actually manageable, a little technology package. So I think those are the highlights of what I see that's happened and caught up since COVID.
Cool. And what do you take away for the post-COVID? What's changed? Since you see them so much, you're in the hotel business as well.
Sure. So I would actually like to echo a lot of the things that were said. And it's really been, for me, a focus overall on sustainability and green technologies from the consumers, but also the legislation, as previously mentioned. We've seen a lot of even states decide they're going to outlaw natural gas or diesel in buildings and in their cities. And a lot of cities declare net zero goals, or companies declare net zero goals. And how does hospitality respond to that, being one of the largest energy consumers of any commercial building types? And so a lot of hospitality owners and developers are thinking, how do we achieve these goals? How do we not have any diesel in my building? How do I bring my energy costs down to meet these green goals? And so that's where we see a lot of change. And before COVID, people weren't really as interested in it. But I think one thing that happened was when everybody went home and they left their office, they realized that those large office towers and their hotel buildings were consuming virtually the same amount of energy. Because even though they weren't occupied, the tools that were in traditional buildings were not intelligent enough to adjust to meet that occupancy. So people were really shocked. And you see that a lot in New York right now, because they're actually rating their buildings based on their current energy usage, not on the LEED certification they got 5 years ago, but the actual today current energy usage. And you've seen examples of, this is a LEED Platinum building, and it's actually a failing grade with energy usage. And how do we fix those things? And I think COVID brought that to light. And so people are really aware that, these, maybe they have a certification, but it's not actually, achieving my energy goals. And how do I really achieve those goals and be mindful of, I don't want to get penalized from this new legislation. I want to be productive. I want to be, helping my city achieve net zero. So that's, the focus that we've seen redirected with COVID.
I think you're right, because the COVID is really kind of the freeze time, let hotelier to think about, holy crap, what we're doing here. So kind of rethink how we can have the downtime to really think through what's the next, So, okay, Keith, what do you think?
Well, I would echo some of those same sentiments, but I think if you go back to the beginning of the pandemic, I think it was shared there at the beginning. Those first few months, revenues completely disappeared. You went from 97, 98% revenue losses, and then as typical in our industry, we've shown, for those of us who've been doing it long enough, 30 plus years, we've seen the multitude of downturns and how resilient this industry is, and how we find new ways to leverage what we do and be creative and rebound when we're coming out of that. This was different though. This was creating cost measures that owners had to be mindful of as we prepare our buildings to try to welcome guests back. And as we saw in many destinations, if you were in a beach resort type destination, you rebounded much quicker, because the minute that travel began to open back up, beaches were opened back up, people felt safe to travel. those type of destinations just flourished during the pandemic. And quite honestly, in some markets had, achieved record results, reference to occupancies and revenues and profitabilities. And so when you start trying to measure the two and decide, well, where do I then reinvest when I'm trying to recover? It kind of becomes a little push and pull at the same time of how do you become smarter. But I do think, we're seeing it, the industry is getting smarter. We have to be more energy conscious because energy costs throughout the entire United States is just really exploded over the last year. So, and I think the other component that maybe sometimes got overlooked was the impact to our staffing, our models, recruitment of finding available staff really became a big challenge as people were, afraid to come back to work, wasn't sure whether it was safe or not. And we had to really think of things differently of how we recruit. And we've seen, significant increases in labor cost as you're trying to recruit the best to get people to return. So it's been a challenging 2 years to some extent, but it's also been a great time of learning and growing. And the one thing that is always proves to be correct, this is still a people business. While we have all these new platforms, and whether it be energy or iOS and our devices and how we connect to one another and how we engage in the hotels, it is still about people and it's still about experiences. So on the operating side, we've got to make sure that we are providing great places for our associates to work, great experiences for our customers to have, and just be a safe place and a clean place and deliver friendly service at the same time. Some of those basics will never change. And we've got to continue to evolve and be great at what we're doing.
Wow, thank you. So such a wonderful inside information. Kind of you live it, you experience it, and have learned some experience as well. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a loaded question, right? So, I'll touch upon the issue of loss of human capital really to the industry and what that means, because it is such a labor intensive business, and we were already experiencing issues with staffing before COVID, so pre-COVID. So for me to keep my restaurants operating, still having a hard time finding cooks at that time, having a hard time finding housekeepers in areas of seasonal properties. We had to go across seas to import labor on of J1 visas and various types of visas in order to survive. And then you throw in COVID, everything comes to a screeching halt. You lose, all those jobs, right, to COVID, and now we have a problem. Once we're back and operating again, we have the issue of people not really wanting to come back to the labor force. And so we have to be creative and find ways to be the most appealing employer, and one that is that focuses on guest retention, on guest recruitment, on employee recruitment, employee retention. And we do that through technology. There are opportunities for technology. Digital tipping, for one, is one of the ways that is one of the things that we're introducing in order to be able to drive labor into our properties. So we're asking our employees to do more with less, and that causes a real strain on the operation. And so that all of that, of course, flows down to the bottom line. You have instances where people can't check in because the rooms are dirty. And that's a very basic concept, is that if we don't have housekeepers, we don't have a product because we don't have rooms. And so that's one of the things that I focus a lot on, is how are we going to attract labor from one that's aging out, right? We're losing a lot of our housekeepers. So, I worked at the Venetian, Palazzo, Cosmopolitan, some of the largest properties in the world. And in some of those instances, we were already on mandated 6 days a week because we didn't have the labor. And so when you, throw COVID into the mix, and again, you put everything comes to a screeching halt when take a city like Vegas, and you're hitting 95% occupancy all the time, because some of those mega hotels run at 95% occupancy, then you stop, right? Then all of that labor force goes away, they're on hold, and then you try to bring them back, and you were already short to begin with. So I really see that there's a massive crisis in our industry when it comes to labor, and technology is really going to be the answer. It has to be the answer.
Thank you for Brendan. So as we know, the hotel is really 24/7. The door never closed. Labor always is the biggest challenge. So let's go to the next question. How do you best see the technology helping the industry with operating efficiency and improving the guest experience? We have what are some examples of these innovations and what needed? Vanessa?
Obviously, this is a wide question. We've talked about, so I'll break it into 3 sections. So the guest facing, the owner operator facing, and the brand facing. And so for the guest facing, clearly we've learned that guests know what they want. They have their own content that they love. They bring their own content with them into guest rooms. And so we just need to continue offering them the ability to watch their content in ways that are or listen to their content in ways that are compelling. And one of the most under discussed pieces of technology in guest room technology, in my opinion, is charging stations. Charging stations isn't very sexy, but it's really important, and it's used. So there are some great new technologies coming out. Legrand's got a great new technology that I love, in a bedside charging station that also manages the use and the electrical load of the lamp that's plugged into it, and has some changes you can choose whether it's USB, USB-C. Anyway, so there's some great technology companies that are bringing some things to the fore as it relates to that from the guest side. Of course, I'm partial to Enseo's things that they're bringing from the guest room technology. But on the owner side, it's really about efficiencies. And we've talked about this a little bit in the first question. We've all hit on it, which is the way to not just have the old style of room control and smart thermostat, but because having a smart thermostat that you can't actually adjust based on occupancy isn't as helpful, right? Because it doesn't do what Hannah mentioned it before. You can have LEED certification and yet fail your energy usage criteria, and that's not an acceptable go-forward answer. That's not gonna pass the financial criteria, the accounting criteria, and the state legislative and the national legislative criteria that's coming at these locations for these hotels. So having controllable smart technology on a hotel-wide basis that can give dashboards and information is critical. When I think it was it Keith that Brandon talked about housekeeping, the technology side that we can have on the operations is efficiency. Knowing which rooms are working and which rooms are not working. So where do we send our housekeepers first? Being efficient and using AI to help us with, even machine learning. How do we know what's the most efficient path for a housekeeper to go from room to room to room? When we're checking people into rooms, checking them into our most efficient rooms first, and then our least efficient rooms. So there's some really kind of seems like table stakes things that are smart, but those are some of the technology pieces that I believe that will be coming at us. That I think are evolving quite quickly.
I like that controllable technology. That's so unique and very, very good, controllable. Okay, Hannah, what do you think?
So along those same lines, we really need technology. If we want this to be a profitable business for owners and developers, how do we get technology to help us maximize our profits and minimize our operational costs? And one of those things is utility usage. So electrical, how do we bring that down as much as possible by using energy efficient technology, lowering our electrical load? How do we use technology to help us minimize the maintenance that was required on our property by sending out alerts when things are not operating correctly, or removing the need to change, 1 million batteries in a property by centralizing batteries? How do we minimize our operational costs and then maximize on some of the things that the guest brings in the room, like a mobile application? some of the items in a hotel, like F&B, could really be an untapped source of revenue. If you can create a technology that makes it much more easy for the guests to utilize that with their own device and order it comfortably, because, I think another thing that changed in COVID was how often we use food services.
Yes, room service, right?
So how do we bring that into the hotel scenario and make it just as easy to order room service from your phone as it is to order from Uber Eats or a DoorDash? Because that we're losing that revenue, right? It's going to those other services. So we really need technology to modernize the way that we use buildings, and also incentivize guests to come to our properties by giving them that able to control the room, make it personalized to them, make it more comfortable for them. I can control my thermostat, lighting, shades, all from my mobile device. That's a lot more engaging to a guest than what they can get at home, which is comfortable. You want to draw them out, bring them to the properties, and give them that experience that they cannot get anywhere else. And technology is going to be that experience that they won't be able to get at home.
I can experience that Sinclair Hotel, that inside the room, no switch, right? Yes, so it's really, really advanced rooms. So what about you, Keith?
I would agree with the sentiments that are shared, and kind of tag on to what Brandon had brought up. I mean, anything where we can use, labor is our number one expense in the hotel, and anything we can do that can still drive the guest experience, but yet enable us to use labor more efficiently and more effectively is going to be a win-win for everybody. If you're an independent owner, some of this technology will feel out of reach because you may not have the resources necessarily to do it. You don't have the scale, and scale matters with some of these updates. So whatever the technology piece and enhancements are, it needs to be one that is it's cost affordable, has a good, quick ROI on it, and is obviously user friendly. All of us have experienced those technology pieces that you're trying to use and it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, then what good is it? And then I think the second or next component of that is making sure that it doesn't create additional work for the operating side for it to happen. Because I think Brandon, as he's shaking his head, we've all rolled out new technology that seems to create more work for us than sometimes it does to improve what we're doing. And I think that's critical. I go back to Vanessa's point. The in-room guest experience, the guest room entertainment platform has to be top shelf. And I think you see across all the major brands that are requiring updates, whether they've happened yet or there's a time frame that they have to happen. We want that experience. I know when 50+ inch TVs were becoming somewhat of a new requirement for hotel rooms, and owners may think that's an egregious expense. That's what people want when they check in. They want that same experience in their room as they're going to get at home. And through the Enseo platform or others, when you can log in and you can log into your Netflix account from home and watch the same shows that you want to watch, that's a huge win. So it enhances and gives you more reason to travel because I can still get the comforts at home per se. But it's got to be a win-win across the platforms, whether it's guest interaction or whether with the associates. Technology that makes our associates' jobs harder, it does not create a win-win, and it actually will create a reason for them not to use it. So therefore we made an investment that's not user friendly. So you got to be very diligent with how we make these decisions to make sure it is going to be a win-win for everybody.
Wow, what a great advice. So next one, Brandon, what do you think about the technology?
Yeah, well, I'd like to piggyback off of what was said there is that it's really important to have operators involved in this decision-making process. And, I have somewhat of a unique background in the sense that I was in operations first. I was director of front office, director of housekeeping. I was a reservationist, concierge, front desk agent, assistant general manager, director of operations, director of environmental services. And it was intentional. I went into so that in order for me to be the best executive that I could be for my team and for the owners, that I went through as many of these disciplines as possible. So I could actually see how all of these things are interrelated. And when I became an asset manager and I was the one who was responsible for deploying capital, I had the credibility to go in and say, okay, we're going to pick this software system. This is why we're going to pick it, and then also not only am I just making that decision, I'm using collaborative collaborative leadership style where I'm asking the housekeepers, the front desk agents, hey, does this work for you or doesn't work for you? I remember one of the properties that I went into. I was actually one of my second tours at that particular property in Vegas, very large property. They were getting ready to make a major purchase in housekeeping. I said, okay. I said, well, what's the feedback from the housekeepers? I said, well, we didn't ask them. I said, why wouldn't you involve the people who are doing the job, 40 hours a week? Why aren't you involving them in the technological solutions? Why aren't you involving them in that process? Now, for us sitting here, it seems like a real basic, but I can tell you that I've experienced that many times over and over again. And so it's important that when we are introducing new technology, that we are involving the people who are going to be using the technology so that we aren't creating more work. They will, because what will happen is your employees or our employees will find workarounds, and they'll do things that we may not want them to do because we haven't given them the proper tools. So they might wedge doors open because we can give them door stops, for example, something that's simple, and they're using our towels or our linens, or they're using them to clean the mirrors and clean the glasses, and because we didn't, it's not their failure, it's our failure because we didn't, involve them in the process and give them something that's actually a workable and viable solution. And I can't stress that more, when you're integrating technology as well. The hardest part, and I've been working with several startups right now, and kudos to iOpen Innovations for involving me as an advisor, because it's not just IT people sitting around and finance people sitting around saying, hey, and purchasing people making the decisions for what technology we're going to be able to use. Now, because I have an education also in managerial finance and accounting, I can talk the language of accountants. I'm not an IT person, but I can, interrelate with those conversations. And also because I'm a general manager and operator, I see how it all flows together. What happens is that we, in this industry, a lot of times put things on the wish list, and then they get pushed back, i.e. technology, okay, maybe we won't get the tablets this time because something else that came up is more pressing. The hotel industry is 24/7, right? And so a lot of times these operators are just trying to get through the day, and especially in properties the size of Vegas. Now, I have experience from 30 room inns all the way up to 7,000 room campuses. I've worked all the United States. I've worked internationally. So I know each of the different segments in regional activity and non-regional activity, and how that all interrelates. What happens though is when you put things on the back burner that really will help you long-term, then you're going to be in this constant cycle, right? So let's talk about energy. We'll put that off to the next CapEx. We'll put that off to the next CapEx. There's a lot of times if the owners can't see a relatable return on investment, then they won't. In other words, you put a 50-inch TV in a room, they're going to want to see, okay, well, how does that impact our ADR, right? And so sometimes it impacts it because the guests, we think we're going to attract more guests, or sometimes we have to do it in order to retain the guests that we already have because our comp set's doing it, right? But we can attach a dollar value to that. So the person who is arguing for the new technology, the asset management, they have to be able to put it in a way to the owners, to the investors, to the equity holders of why this is important and how they're going to see the return and when they're going to see the return. And that's the most difficult part is really getting them to accept this technology as not a wish, but a must. We have to have this.
And can I add one more point?
No.
Yeah. I think everybody's mentioned something that's really important here, but I want to kind of drive it home just a little bit more. Total cost of ownership is so important. We are in a time of increased innovation.
Yes.
There's going to be a lot of new companies that you don't know, new technologies that we've not seen before. This is where the independent hotels have a huge advantage over the branded hotels, in my opinion. because the entrepreneur, and this hotel is a great example of that, the entrepreneur who's driving innovation, they are looking at their own bottom line. And like Hannah said, they're looking for how do they improve the profitability of this enterprise. And so what are they doing that's for the benefit of the enterprise? So I would just really urge everyone, as they're looking at new technologies and new companies, technologies can seem really fun and really sexy, whether it's on a guest perspective or a dashboard perspective, but the total cost of ownership is something that you have to look at, whether it's changing batteries in every room, or the downtime, or the fact that it's so difficult, people won't be able to use it because the usability just isn't there. So those are some things as you're looking at and evaluating new innovative technologies, be sure to dig all the way in on that total cost of ownership as well as the usability.
Wow, thank you for Vanessa, such an inside information. And thank you, Brandon, talk about technologies. You brought it up from top to bottom and the very tedious, you consider every tedious stuff. Thank you, insight. So the next question for Keith. Running a hotel isn't easy, let alone you have managed hundreds of hotels. You have tremendous experience. Can you share with us what's the most challenging you have and how do you manage that?
Well, I could talk for hours on that, I feel like.
Go ahead, I'll give you an hour.
Yeah, but I'll do it in a couple of minutes. I'll try to be quick with it. I think the biggest opportunity, and at least for us and in my role with the large company and hotels that we have at Highgate, is staying connected with our teams. When you get to the corporate level support, it is easily to get distracted by the urgency, or as we like to call it, the proverbial fire of the day. And those things are real. Those things just happen, and we have to adjust to it, and we have to be cognizant of it. But it's really about being very intentional and purposeful with our teams and staying connected with them. And one thing that I really love about Highgate is, when I had the opportunity to join this company, was just the servant leadership mentality of our principals, of our CEO, of our COO, that we're here to serve our general managers and our teams. They're not here to serve our needs. And that's how we show up every single day, is to try to make literally today better than yesterday, and plan to try to make tomorrow better than today. So using, whether it's technology, and we use it in a variety of different ways, to stay really connected to our teams and make sure that we've got a good line of communication to help resolve the opportunities that we are faced with, is how we try to stay focused on it. Doesn't mean that we are perfect at that. We have days where there's just there's a lot of competing priorities, but making sure our teams understand the goals at hand, what it is that they are accountable for, and making sure that we celebrate them along the way. Those are really the quickest ways as I can try to explain that. We're spread out across the entire United States on Highgate Select, and being very intentional with our BPOs and our area managing directors, to where our general managers feel they have everything that they need to be successful. We look at our general managers as the CEO of their business. We expect them to make those type of decisions. We don't want to be in the way. We want to be removing barriers for them and removing obstacles of what they need in support. And so while we've got our budgets and we've got our guidelines and we've got our service plans, it's really about just staying connected and making sure we understand what they're going. Because the reality is, most of us in our roles, we haven't led a hotel during a pandemic. We are operating at the corporate level. So it's easy to say, well, here's what I did back in my day, per se. None of that is applicable today. Brandon talked about housekeeping and room attendants. It doesn't matter whether you're at a 7,000 room hotel or a 30 room hotel. If you're short staffed at front desk and in room attendants, it's the same challenge and opportunity. So, we've done a better job, I think, than some of our contemporaries have, of trying to create great working environments and making sure we're doing what we need to do. We've been very flexible, and we've had the great opportunity with our partners and owners and our principals to be flexible in markets where we needed to be with labor. Labor moved, as far as wages, moved quicker than we would have ever thought possible just 3 years ago. And so we've had to be flexible in that piece, make sure we're giving our teams every resource that we can give them to be successful. And we believe if we do that well, and we stay connected and we serve one another, then the results that we are tasked with creating are going to happen.
Wow.
Well said.
The takeaway I take notes is communication, communication, communication. I think it's really big, important. Without communication, people kind of, oh, I think it should be this way. So, and another takeaway is when I see that your website, Highgate, oh my God, so elegant and so profound. Highgate really got such a great branding, strong branding. Thank you. We really appreciate you joining here.
Pleasure.
Okay, thank you. The next question for Brendan. You have managed Las Vegas mega property with thousands of rooms. Please explain how technology can help your employees and guests save in these large properties.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Great answer, Keith, too. Great response. I like that whole intentional part, and that's goes back to kind of what Vanessa was saying as well. But you really need the independents have an opportunity. I mean, I've worked for corporate properties in these mega resorts, and I've worked for properties that are independent. And one of the things that I love about independent properties is that the speed of which you can make changes is much quicker. I'm dealing with another organization right now we're doing some consulting with, and I won't mention who they are, but they're fantastic. But they're so large that it's like, trying to turn the Titanic, and it takes such a long time. And I think one of the reasons why I was so successful at my last property and was made a partner was because I could make these changes quickly. And if I needed to adapt, we could do so. So there's something to be said for being at independence and having that luxury of dealing just directly with ownership. So as far as these large properties are concerned, yeah, you obviously can't operate without this technology. And one of the reasons why I was really excited about working with iOpen Innovations was their ability to be able to expand upon a certain element of what they were doing. So they had, and they still do, the basis of the platform software that they're using was to actually, for the benefit of the single traveler, primarily. That's where it came from, and it was inspired from one of their friends who's a traveling surgeon, I believe, because of COVID. She, was always felt unsettled by checking into the rooms, and you've probably seen the YouTube videos where you have tips from these travelers, and they show you how to look behind the doors and underneath the beds and into the shower, all of those kinds of things that you may not think about. Some of us may not think about, but others feel vulnerable to. And so this was a technology that, by using a GPS locator and sensors and that, you could actually opt in and when you check in and hit the link, and it would actually put you into the screen where you could actually see if there was anybody in your room, and you would know whether or not to enter, whether or not that was safe. So I was advising them on, say, hey, that's great. What I would like to do is continue to expand upon that, on all these different things that we can integrate, and instead of having it be so fragmented and having to try to have all these different components, it wouldn't be great to go through one company and have one-stop shopping. So one of the things that's I have a lot of passion for is the safety of my housekeepers, and the panic alarm systems, and are extremely important. I have an instance where, one night I was at the Cosmopolitan, and it was late at night, and my housekeeper was doing a turn down service, and unfortunately she was being attacked by the guests, VIP guests that were in that room. Now, fortunately, she was able to make it to the telephone, but in most cases, you're not able to do so, and you need that immediate opportunity to be able to hit a panic alarm system so it alerts security, and it alerts all the appropriate players that will respond. So, we took that aspect of having a panic alarm and expanded it my inspiration for expanding it into kind of like a command center type of platform was what happened in October 1st, 2017 at the Mandalay Bay, when that shooter, unfortunately massacred those people at the concert. Now I have, friends of mine that were executives that work at the MGM and are in that area, and it was just a terrible situation. And I thought, well, you know what? How great would it be to be able to map the hotel and then be able to see where your employees are, who they are, and give them a method in which they can communicate via text or via audio, and you can actually see where they are, and you can actually give that information give eyes on it, not only to security, but to the law enforcement that's there. And you can notify your guests and say, hey, you need to stay in place in these rooms because we have an active shooter in, whatever room it is. And it's sad to think that we have to think that way, but it happens, and we need to do whatever we can to protect our guests and protect our employees. And so I'm really excited about the technology. We're getting ready to roll it out very soon, and I've already shown it to some of my fellow colleagues, and they're very excited about it. So yeah, technology definitely is needed in all places, metropolitan resorts. You see things that happen in beach resorts and things, and unfortunately happen. And so the best thing to do is to be able to put in technology platforms that can help prevent these types of incidents and keep our guests and our employees safe. So, these properties, I was when I was at the Venetian Palazzo, 7,000 rooms, but then there's over 2 million square feet of public space, and so when I oversaw environmental services, they clean the public spaces. And so we can't be everywhere when you only have 3 supervisors on one shift and you've got 50 to 60 employees spread out all over that property. And that, I won't go on to the next level of what we would do with that as far as labor productivity management and all of that. But from a safety perspective, that allows us to see, okay, well, we have, Miguel or Sally or whomever it is over at the pool cleaning, and we know she's there, and she's had a medical alert, or something's not right, or whatever it is, we can actually go to that spot and know where she is immediately. So really excited about what iOpen Innovations is doing with that.
Thank you so much. That's why we are so fortunate to have you as our tech advisor. And also, while you have fun, stay at the hotel, safety is always the most concern. The next question for Hannah. The Sinclair Hotel is one of the most advanced technology hotel in the world. Can you share what's on the horizon? Can you share about the Net Zero Hotel in Connecticut and then the next project in San Francisco?
Sure. So, yeah. So there's several things that we think about when building buildings, and we call it the Tesla moment for buildings. So what we're doing when we're designing a property is looking at the very infrastructure of the building. And when we look around and we see our endpoints, our TVs, our electronics, all of them have changed drastically in the past 60 years. I mean, unrecognizably. But when we look at the infrastructure, it really hasn't changed. You'll see the exact same circuit panels, the same way we've been doing it. And so when we look at a property, we think, what is the best way, most efficient way to power all these things in the building and power and communicate with them on the same infrastructure instead of having these isolated silos? And so some technologies that we're deploying are really trying to minimize those AC to DC conversions, lower your electrical usage, and use a DC safe to touch infrastructure. We talked about safety is very important. And so by using technologies like power over Ethernet and safe to touch class 4 power, you actually can't start a fire and no one can get shocked by these things. You don't need conduit to run them in, and you can use lower labor to install them, and they can be managed and maintained by any of the maintenance people. You don't have to have a safe electrical contractor to make these changes and adjustments. So we're also looking at a building as a complete DC building that can really maximize your energy usage. We're also thinking about how do we back up our buildings? You know, we see every time we had that freeze in Texas, we're seeing brownouts in California. How do we make our buildings more resilient? And using a diesel generator as a backup, you know, one is very bad for the environment. You have to have a lot of fuel. You have to test it monthly. Two, it can be very maintenance heavy. So you have to have a lot of maintenance on it. So how do we do that more efficiently today? And what we've seen with the whole world and with electric vehicles in particular is the advancement of lithium-ion batteries. So things we're doing in our properties is using batteries, not just to back up the building, but then connect with other technologies that have advanced, like renewable energies. So when we're talking about the DC building, you know, renewables, batteries, LEDs, the infrastructure, it's all DC today. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what we did in New Haven, Connecticut. So that's the first net zero hotel. So they're using a battery not only to back up their whole building, but it also collects solar and they can do demand response from the grid. So they actually lost power a few months ago for 2.5 hours, and they didn't lose power to a single device in their building because they were able to use their battery. We minimized their load in the building by using low voltage technology to lower their energy costs. And then so they were able to keep all those things on with the battery system connected to solar. So resiliency is really important, and it can become, you know, a completely another revenue generating aspect of your hotel. You know, every grid has these things they call demand response, where the grid is saying, you know, I'm using a lot of energy. Can you come off the grid for an hour, 2 hours, and we'll pay you for that time. So if you have a battery system that you already would need for emergency power backup anyway, it's required in a building, you can use that to generate revenue for your property. So that when we're talking about, you know, total cost of ownership, you know, you should, those things can be factored in. So when you're building a building or thinking about doing a heavy renovation, just think about what is the best way to do it today, not what's the best way to do it 60 years ago. How can I use technology intelligently today, not just for, you know, things that the guests see like mobile applications, but actually the infrastructure of the building that can really change the way that I use a building and operate a building. So, you know, we've just completed the property in New Haven, which is the first net zero hotel. And we're about to do another property in San Francisco. So that will also use batteries and low voltage technologies there. It won't have it's right in the heart of downtown, so it won't have the ability to do solar, but they will be able to use that battery for demand response, peak load shaving off the grid to lower their energy even more. They'll be able to back up other things in their building, not just emergency systems. And they're going to be using a lot of this technology to automate their rooms, have mobile application. So it's really going to be a very luxurious experience for the guests, but also a very energy efficient building for the operators and owners. So when we think about buildings, you know, it's really about how do we use the tools we have today, like batteries, DC technologies, and also guest experience technologies, you know, combined into one infrastructure, not separate silos, but one infrastructure designed from the beginning, not thought about later. And that's how we think about buildings from the very beginning, and you know, incorporating technology all the way into design and construction is really key and important.
That's really eye-opening, really. Never heard about net zero. So the cost very, very low or just pretty much zero.
Right. They don't have any electrical costs at all because they're generating all of their energy load with the solar, and they don't have to have any electrical bill.
Wow. Why the hotel doesn't want to pay electricity bill? Can't pay payment right now. Thank you for the insight. The last question for Vanessa. You have very successful story regarding NCO. Can you share with us some of your journey and what you saw the guests wanting them and what they might looking for in the future?
So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. You know, innovation has always been the backbone of how NCO grew. I think the challenges of how NCO grew were the challenges of needs between the owners and the brands, because they don't always have the same goals in mind, which is an interesting dynamic as a vendor to be kind of in the middle of that space and trying to serve the guest needs, the owner needs, and the brand needs. Certainly the big growth of Enseo in the 2013, 2014 timeframe was related to guest room entertainment and allowing guests to bring their content into the room and recognize that the most important content in the room was the content that the guests brought with them, whether that was their Bluetooth music from their phone or whether that was their Netflix that they already had or their HBO. I remember a really fun conversation I had with the CEO of Cosmopolitan at the time. And I told him we were going to remove his video on demand system when we replaced it with our in-room entertainment system. And he said, well, you can't do that. We're in Las Vegas. You can't remove movies from the room. Like, we're not removing movies. We're just giving them the movies that they want to watch. Oh, they want to watch, other movies. I'm like, well, they can watch other movies on their own devices. You've got plenty of network bandwidth for that. And so we did a deal that said if in 60 days, if there were concerns or problems with the system because there weren't, they call it non-Hollywood movies. But they didn't have the VOD movies anymore in the system, that we would completely pull out our system at no cost and they'd have a zero cost. In fact, what happened is the guest room entertainment rose in guest satisfaction over 200% because they didn't have problems. It worked every time. And this kind of delight of it just works. The guests knew how to do it. They knew how to log into Netflix. The hotel didn't have to worry about it because it worked every time. In fact, we were able to lower operating expenses to the hotel because we worked with them with their security guards. If the door isn't closed all the way, they had to actually deploy a security guard all the way to the room. So we just added into that system, that platform, the ability to notice when there was a message from the door that said that the door was ajar. We did this for MGM and for Cosmopolitan. And so we sent a note to security. Security then sent a note on the TV screen and or called the room and said, did you want your room open? Wow. And just by doing that, they were able to actually remove, Cosmopolitan specifically was able to remove 10 full-time employees a year, just based on not having to answer those room calls and not having to replace technology that broke in the rooms themselves. And so, those are fun things to have done. From an associate safety perspective, I love that Brandon's bringing up associate safety. We put the first associate safety system made safe in the JW Essex House in 2014. And that logged again into our platform of the system, which already had a full 3D map of the hotel, every room, every closet, every connection of every device in the hotel. We were managing all of that remotely from our offices and our HQ, being able to add into that the associate safety devices themselves. We were also able to work with the brand requirements and, very importantly, the labor organization requirements, because some labor organizations don't want you to be able to know where your associates are until they are in distress and push the button. So we had an opportunity to configure the system one way or the other. So some we could configure it one way, the others we could configure it another. So again, being able to have a platform that's configurable by location, by brand requirements, by municipal requirements, and to have it just work every time is critical. On the go forward basis, I'll put what we're looking at on a go forward basis, what we see is important in a general term. And I'm going to call this general term force multiplier. Because labor is our #1 biggest challenge across the board in the industry, force multipliers are really what we need. Yeah. How do we allow guests to still get the service that they need with less people? How do we allow our people that are on the ground to have a culture that they want to work in that's exciting so that they can be used more efficiently? And so we think there's some, whether it's, one of the things I think was really fun that we did during COVID was we put in a whole new system that allowed it to be a front desk agent. I called it Vera. So Vera was a virtual front desk agent that was allowed to be hosted in a third-party location. And so a group of hotels could share a bank of front desk agents who were able to man the front desk digitally. And instead of I need to be able to shake the person's hand, we actually learned we didn't need to shake people's hands anymore. Shaking hands is a little overrated. Zoom screens like we're doing right here, also underrated. Like we feel really like we can have a personal conversation with someone when we are on a screen with them and we can see their face and see, because masks are great. I'm a big mask fan, but you don't get to see all of the affect of someone's face when they're behind a mask. On a Zoom screen, you actually do get to see their whole face. So using some of those technologies like Vera as a force multiplier, being able to use MaidSafe to understand where people are, not only giving associate safety, but also being able to be efficient and making sure that you can do directives as far as housekeeping going from one room to the next room that's open, things like that. So those are kind of the overall pieces that I see.
Do we have any questions from online? No, okay, so we're good, so
Final round,
final round, so
last thoughts.
so what to take away from the, because this is kind of GEW kind of, what do you have some advice for the startup, for innovation, for technology, for hotels? Vanessa?
You know, I think that the choice that you had for the people here in the room is so fantastic. Thank you for curating such a great group. I can't imagine a better team to talk about the culture of innovation than Sinclair, Highgate, and the other people on the panel here. You know, Highgate was one of my favorite owners, managers to work with of all time, just because from the top down, always willing to work on culture.
Yes.
Always willing to be open to new things, always willing to offer advice. And I think if we are all doing that as we're looking at how we provide innovation on a go-forward basis, we'll have less problem with labor, we'll have less problems with our team, we'll have better team members. And if we're listening to our better team members, innovation's bound to be coming out the other end of that.
Wow, thank you so much. Hannah?
Sure. So I think my, final takeaway is that to just really embolden the entrepreneur and the owners and the developers to really embrace technology and really think outside the box and not just rely 100% on the traditional architect or MEP, but really try to look at what's possible today. And so I know that that's difficult. It's a very complex world, and there's a lot of options. But we've really seen some amazing innovations come out the past few years, and they really work, and they've really shown viable cost-saving solutions and opportunities. And really not looking at technology as something that's new and scary, but something that's an opportunity for properties that can really, be revenue generating, be better for the guest experience, and can be better for the operations all around. So that would be my encouragement to any operators or entrepreneurs in the call, is really to embrace technology and see it as opportunity rather than risk.
Yeah, that's what innovation come from. We do better for the old system. We embrace the old system to get to the next level. Keith, what about your takeaway? What do you think the technology for hotels?
You're on mute.
Thank
Keith,
you.
you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm good now. Sorry. Obviously, I got to learn how to use technology a little bit better to make sure I'm not muted up. I think that the principle is there are so many new technologies that are coming out. We have things that we're beta testing all the time. I think the better startups or companies have this, this new idea that they've come up with, because they're trying to, engage with our industry. It's really important that they understand our industry. And I think it was said by Vanessa about the competing priorities between owners and brands, especially when you get to the big brands piece. Some of them are just so big that it's difficult to make inroads because the current platforms in place really are not acceptable to new technology from an interfacing perspective. So I think you got to be ensure that you understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish as you're getting in there. But technology, especially when it comes to how do we, and it's not about eliminating jobs, how do we use it to replace the labor force that doesn't exist today? We have positions we cannot fill. And, for many of us, my Delta app is my #1 app. I mean, it gets me everywhere I'm going when I need to. It's very efficient. It never fails me. Those type of experiences have to be able to also be relevant in our hotels, restaurants. I think Vanessa said it best. You don't always need to say hi to somebody. But if you are going to have to say hi to somebody, that engagement's got to be absolutely perfect. So how can we leverage the technology to make that part a little more seamless, a little more flexible, which will help us with the labor market. And I think anything we can do there is going to be beneficial for us as we continue to grow together.
Thank you so much. The last one, Brandon, take away.
Do we have any time left, or we're good?
Keep going, keep going.
Yeah, so I think that the technology has a place for all different types of markets. You have your business market, and those guests are looking for something different than, say, your luxury market. I don't see a time, and I could be wrong, but I've worked for 5-star, 5-diamond properties, really, chateaus, and I can tell you that for those that human contact, that face to face. When you check into a Four Seasons, that they're going to want to see that person on the other side of the desk. Now that differs from somebody who's checking in and on business or some of these other large properties. So there's not a one size fits all. And I think that what we need to do is I think it's really important for these tech companies to have advisors on their team so that they can go through these different types of nuances and discuss that with them and have products that are flexible. So one of the things I talk about a lot is that you can, and Vanessa touched on that, is where, for example, labor unions don't want to have their employees tracked, so to speak, although that may go away. But regardless, you have to be able to adjust to that and have the flexibility to that. Or an independent hotel or a property like Venetian Plaza, who's non-union, doesn't have that same type of restriction. So they can use the devices for tracking and for labor management, cost management, and things of that nature. One of the things that's important too is that, and we don't really think about this, I'm always talking about the net effect on what cost is. And if you can find savings through adding technology that you may not understand that is directly related, for example, liability. So if you've ever been part of a lawsuit, had to been deposed, when it comes to things like safety, it's much better to have layers of things that you do that are safe, and that could, translate to real dollars too, while your insurance companies actually giving you reduced rates or premiums because you have all of these safety measures in place. So with the technology, if you're going to be able to explain to the final decision makers who have to approve the capital, i.e. me, then you've got to be able to tell a story, and you've got to be able to tell it all the way through to the bottom line. And work smarter, not harder. And the last thing I'll say is that we didn't really get to talk about it much, but the introduction of robots and self-cleaning showers, self-cleaning toilets, auto beds that do most of the work as far as stripping and making a bed, vacuuming, robotic vacuumings, and a lot of people will say, okay, well, you're replacing labor. Well, to Keith's point, replacing labor that's not there. The other thing is a real benefit because you can actually pay your employees more if the ones that you do have, because what you should do is take that part of that cost savings and add it to the employee's hourly rate or wage. And that lends to, along with a positive culture, which is the most important, it lends to retention, because now instead of making $15 an hour, the company can afford to pay them $25 an hour. And then if you have other measurements in place, like tipping, for example, now they're making $30 to $35 an hour for a housekeeping job, making over $70,000 a year, and they can actually have a livable wage. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you for today's hybrid event, and thank you, Vanessa, Anna, and Keith and Brandon. Thank you for your insight and your wisdom shared with us. Thank you so much.